This is TWiT.
Cathy's also a contributor at Tech Dirt and read the entire 241-page filing from Twitter's attorneys at the Chancery of the State of Delaware. Did you read it all? Actually, it's only 62 pages. It's not. You could do that in the morning.
I did some preparation for today. I have not read every word, but I read the most of the filing, I think I read all of, there's a motion to expedite that came out today. And then I was going back to the original agreement and I looked over a couple of the terms of the agreement.
Oh, you did your homework.
I did. I even went. I know. Well, this is so annoying. Last time I complained that you made me remember corporate law. So I even went and looked for my corporate law notes, which I could not find. But I've prepared sensible things to say on the subject because somehow I thought you might ask me a few things. So
not too many. We're not going to make this.
So what do you think, Cathy? What do you think?
All right.
Well, let me give you a less open-ended question because that could be a lot of things. Maybe start at the 30,000-foot level. Twitter is suing Musk, saying, you said you were going to give us $44 billion, and by God, we want the $44 billion. They're suing in Delaware because that's where Twitter is incorporated. It's in the Chancery Court, which I've been told in some of the actions like this moves quickly. What is the time frame you think for this kind of a lawsuit?
I don't know, but the motion for to expedite was there's supposed to be a drop-dead date built into the merger agreement itself, which was like October 24th of this year. So the idea with the motion to expedite is that there'll be about 2 months of pretrial, so whatever discovery would happen, enough time for a trial and enough time for an appeal for there to be a final resolution that would happen before October 24th. So that sort of thing is apparently not unprecedented, according to the motion to expedite. It's fast by general terms, even without the expedite.
Because I've heard people say, "Oh, it's going to be 10 years before this is resolved." No. It's not a decade-long action.
No,
I went through this with Time Warner and Paramount because there was a fight over that just as we were starting Entertainment Weekly, and it was a couple of weeks.
Delaware is very corporate friendly too. That's why you incorporate in Delaware.
It's not really a regular court, I don't think. The Chancery Court is every so often you hit things that sort of have courts with unusual jurisdiction, and the terms of that jurisdiction tend to be very narrow, but by being very narrow, they can be very efficient. So we're not talking a normal federal civil litigation trial, which has its own timeline for how long it would take. This is something that speaks to Delaware law specifically, corporate law specifically, and the Chancery courts being the courts of jurisdiction to work this out. And so they've seen this before. Delaware has laws built in order to companies like going there because it can be so efficient from the corporate law front. And so they got systems. But this is kind of, people have reflexes from general standard federal civil litigation. And those instincts don't really apply here, both in terms of the process and also, I think, in terms of the substance, where even though this is a breach of contract claim and you see those in federal court, this is an unusual and very specific type of breach of contract claim. And it's
one that features, for instance, a variety of tweets. And emojis are involved.
Well, I meant in terms of normal Chancery court things, but yes, it also has the one thing that will be interesting is, well, the one thing, there's probably a lot that's interesting about this, but it also has some characteristics that are unusual for the Chancery court to be dealing with. So I don't know if they've ever adjudicated a poop emoji before, but now they will.
It'll be the first. Yeah. It's appropriate since World Emoji Day is Friday. I guess I'm not sure what Twitter wants to gain from this. It's because the money isn't coming out of Elon Musk's ample pockets, but involves a number of other investors. I don't know if they really intend to get all $44 billion. They may, but they want more than $1 billion. They want more than the $1 billion breakup fee. They
deserve it.
Important paragraph, I think, in paragraph 4 of the nature of the action. That price presented by Musk on a take-it-or-leave-it basis in an unsolicited public offer represented a 38% premium over Twitter's unaffected share price. Unaffected at the moment, soon to be affected. The other terms Musk offered and agreed to were, he touted, seller-friendly, there is no financing contingency, and no diligence condition. The deal is backed by airtight debt and equity commitments. Musk has personally committed $33.5 billion. I think that $33.5 billion is an important number. I suspect that's maybe the number they think they can get out of Musk. Although he wouldn't then own the company. He would. I don't know what that. It's very complicated because in order to buy the company, he has to have a proxy vote with the shareholders. Gets 51% of the proxy vote, and then all the shareholders have to get $54.20 per share, which is a total of.
And he's already said he
billion.
doesn't want it.
And he said he doesn't want it, and presumably the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia and Larry Ellison and the others who've put up money. Larry put up $1 billion himself. Are they going to be? Actually, that's a question for you, Cathy. Are they bound by what the Court of Chancery says?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure they'd be bound specifically because I think
they're loaning him the money, right?
Yeah. The contracts are with Musk, and chances are he might be in breach of their contracts to them where they could basically pull their money. Like he might end up, I don't think I'm speaking out of school on this, but I could be wrong. Like all of this is A, I'm not a corporate lawyer, and B, law is not very stable these days, and C, this is really pushing the edges of it. But one outcome is he could potentially be on the hook for, if he even can't do the purchase, but some form of damages that comes close to the purchase price and not really have a way to finance it. And one question is, then what? He may have a judgment against him. It may, and what does he do if he's got this judge? What happens to Twitter if Twitter wins the money, has an award against him? What money can they actually extract from him? Right. This is going to be, the problem with the last 5-6 years in law is that we've been stress testing every single aspect of constitutional law, corporate law, contract law, tort law. Everything has been going against the outer boundaries of how this law is supposed to function. And when you go to that and you push the edges, you find out to what extent it actually can function well at the edges. This isn't supposed to happen. This isn't supposed to be a kind of thing that's supposed to happen. And Twitter's complaint really kind of puts together why it's not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to have a purchaser walk in, make an offer, and then essentially vandalize the company and then walk away from the deal.
Yeah.
So
they say Musk's exit strategy is a model of hypocrisy, a model of bad faith. The claims are pretext and lack any merit. I've said this before. We're in a situation, we have been for 5 years. Everything in this country, the rule of law is kind of assuming a certain amount of normal behavior. And when people are willing to go beyond the norms, we often don't have a remedy.
Then the question is, do we enforce the law, in this case, and the norms? Though you're right, those are two different things. But there is precedent here. There are things to call upon. I put up a really good thread from Morgan Ricks about the remedies involved, a Vanderbilt law professor. And I'll just read two of them. It's very daunting to order specific performance in a situation like this. There's external financing that has to be made to perform, which is what you just talked about. And if Musk flouts your order? It turns into a showdown over the court's jurisdiction and power, which is what you're saying, Leo, is that when you don't follow all the rules.
Yeah, if you just walk away, what are the Chancery's going to come after you?
Well, there's Chancery. There's also, don't forget, SEC, right? Because he's
who has, by the way, up to now been kind of lenient with Mr. Musk, shall we say?
Well, I think he's in trouble with SEC is going to happen to him. If they enforce it, that's irrespective of what happens with this case.
Exactly.
But the issue is
that's punishment.
Normally specific performance over a human being as a remedy for contracts is disfavored because there's a 13th Amendment problem with forcing another human being to do something they don't want to do. This is a little unusual because he's sort of a human being and sort of in corporate form. And it's not quite clear. You can sometimes get specific performance out of like an enterprise. Yes, come into close your deal. You have no choice. You can't walk away. It's been happened, and they're citing a Tyson Foods merger from sometime in this millennium as an example of one where it would happen. But it's tricky under the best of circumstances, and this is really sort of the outer edge of this is not normal. This is a human being who happened to have $1 billion to throw around. So it's very strange.
Ricks thinks that they're owed $1 billion for the breakup fee, which I certainly would agree with, and $1 billion in monetary damages. Now, where did he come up with $1 billion for that? But I think you're talking that everybody's talking about how Twitter is so bad off. Twitter could get rid of Musk And I think we'll get a few more billion cash in the bank. Now, if they have a different board and different management, that's a different question. What do they do with it? But I think Twitter could end up, in the long run, hurt for now. But if they can get rid of Musk and get some money, celebrate.
So that's the point
that's what Ev said,
of these lawsuits and everything. It's weird because Ev also said Twitter should just walk away and say fine. And what a number of people complained about Ev, who's the founder of Twitter, Ev's tweet was, that ignores the damage that Elon has done to shareholders. Right. There is, beyond the hurt to
There's
Twitter,
a fiduciary duty to shareholders here.
there is look at the current stock price for Twitter. I mean, this was damaging. This looks, like almost like a pump and dump scheme that went horribly wrong. And who gets damaged in a pump and dump scheme is the everyday investors. So it's easy for Ev, billionaire to billionaire, to say, "I'll let Elon off the hook," but there are a lot of Twitter investors who are left holding the bag. And
that's what the Chancery Court cares about.
Right,
the Chancery Court is all about shareholder protection. Yes. I mean, possibly at the expense of other things that would be good for law to care about, but that's what Delaware corporate law optimizes for: protection of shareholders, particularly of minority shareholders. And so that's what its adjudication in this forum is going to be keyed towards. And yeah, there's been damage. I mean, I use the word vandalized. Twitter didn't use that word, but they basically make the same point of, you came, you offered, you kind of made it that we couldn't say no. And then we said yes to let you go ahead and close this deal. And you immediately disparaged us, and here's your poop emoji. This is it's
which
a very
was
cogent argument,
specifically in violation of their agreement. They had a non-disparagement agreement.
Yes,
you were saying that Twitter deserves more than the $1 billion clause that was there. Is it only because of his poor behavior, or if he hadn't done any of these stupid tweets and poop emoji things and decided, you know what, I don't want to do this? Are you saying, okay, now they only deserve the $1 billion? No,
that happens all the time.
Really
People back out of agreements all the time.
So this is the answer that I prepared in advance because yes. Although all the caveats, not a corporate lawyer, this is weird. Yeah. This is outside the jurisdiction. But one basic point to point out is I think normal Americans view damages you win in a lawsuit as sort of like almost a prize of like, woohoo, we got $1 million of the settlement or something like that. And that's not how damages are supposed to work. The idea of damages is that it's supposed to, in most cases, it's supposed to make you whole, particularly in a contract case. That the idea of damages is that the parties had thought they were okay. They thought they were going to have this deal, and the deal fell apart. So the point of the damages is to make them as okay as they would have been if the deal had closed. So the idea with the $1 billion fee that they wrote in is that, okay, if this deal falls apart, and I think the $1 billion, that clause maybe could have been better written, but I think the point of it is, if the deal fails for a couple of reasons we can't anticipate, we'll be hurt, but we think that the hurt can be measured by $1 billion, and if you pay it, we'll be whole, and then go about your lives. The issue is that Musk did more, and the reason is getting breached is not necessarily one of those terms that it was anticipated, but other terms beyond that, and also he caused additional harm. So I think what's happening with this complaint is that it's being queued up to try to get something more to recognize the huge hurt to Twitter. And I don't think that $1 billion will necessarily function as a cap, because I think it was based on, if you walk away from a number of these circumstances we can anticipate, this is the measure of damages, but that Twitter is now arguing this is something that nobody would have ever anticipated, because we would have anticipated that you'd act in good faith, and because you acted in this way instead, nobody could infer that you're acting in good faith, and we can't clean up the mess that you've made for us just because you've walked away now. So
Cathy,
I think they're trying to do that.
So if you look at the market cap right now, sorry, you go ahead, Ann. Sorry.
I don't claim to know the law like anybody else would. That's not a lawyer. But does defamation come in here? Is anything around that part of this consideration for his bad acting? Or is it just...
Or is that a different
contract?
So I think the thing is that the jurisdiction and the claims may be limited, but I'm speaking a little bit outside my zone here. But this is not a blank slate for other types of claims that they might have against Elon Musk, including under California law, like unfair business practices.
So they could make that too?
Not
They could
here.
also they
This
could
is
go to
Delaware.
another court. No, not Chancery, but they could, whatever they win in Chancery, they could still go, to Ann's question, could they go to another court on another action?
I don't know.
Or the settlement here would be, here's your money, that ends it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, basically, one of the things that like you're trained up in law school is you play the hand you're dealt. But sometimes there's certain ways that things are set up where it's like, no, that's much more of a Hail Mary than you thought. And I don't know the answer to the question of how many bites at the apple and how many courts they could get. But if they found that they needed more bites, they would certainly try to get some, assuming it made sense to spend. Yeah. But I don't know if they can. And right now you've got a live contract where there's been a breach, and right now the Chancery Court is the one to adjudicate the breach. And when they look at what broke and the hurt that happened, they're looking for a measure of damages. Now, I think one of the reasons they're asking for specific performance is that share price is a way of starting to come up with a number. So if it's not going to be forcing him to purchase at that number, then it might translate into some other form of money, and that's going to turn into multiples of billions, I believe, is the math.
The current
I think that's what they're shooting for.
So, Cathy, to answer that, the current market cap is $28 billion. The offer was $44 billion. So right there is $16 billion as a starting point. Now, probably not going to end up there. You could argue that the $44 billion was not the high end. It was what the stock was at the time, but that's still a lot more than $28 billion. So to Leo's point, the damage to the shareholders is considerable and measurable. And then to go to Ann's point, there's also damage to reputation. They've lost management. They're losing people. There are all kinds of other things too.
People were leaving because of the speculation of him being the new ownership.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't frame it as defamation, partly because defamation is very narrow in the United States, and corporate defamation is even more narrow than that. But there's definitely an issue of disparagement, which they bring up in the complaint, because he was obligated not to disparage the company, and he did. And in theory, the deal could still close, even though he did. But then he disparaged and then walked away. So now they're like, these are the things of the true measure of damages, not necessarily the billion they had pre-negotiated, because they knew how much harm he could potentially cause if they walked away, but they hadn't anticipated how much harm he could cause if he also breached the non-disparagement clause. So somehow they would probably want to collect the money that would count that damage and remediate it. I don't know if this is the vehicle for it, but they're swinging for the fences as far as this vehicle is concerned to try to get a number that's high enough. And realistically, if they got a number that's high enough, then
if you had, all right, let's do a pool. If let's presume that Twitter wins and Musk gets away. Musk has to pay an amount. It may come out of Chancery. It may come out of a settlement. What number do you think might be each of you?
Well, I should point out, and you brought this up, Cathy, that the precedent for this is that earlier Tyson Foods case where they tried to back out of a purchase of the Iowa pork producers, IBP. This is in 2003. And the Chancery Court said, no, you can't back out. You've got to buy them. It's not exactly analogous.
I hope that doesn't happen here.
Well, it's not exactly analogous, but it's similar. And by the way, Tyson did a lot of damage in the process, chasing off other bidders like Smithfield, who also wanted them. So IBP had a pretty good cause in this case to say, hey, you really damaged us. And Tyson was forced to buy them. So I think that's what Twitter is saying is this is like Tyson. There isn't a material adverse effect. Elon publicly has said the problem is that the Twitter's figure of 5% spam bots is way low. That's not what his lawyers Skadden Arps said in their complaint against Twitter and their request to back out of the deal. They said that Twitter was non-cooperative. And Twitter's saying, what do you mean non-cooperative? A, we were, and B, we didn't have to be. We were more cooperative than we even had to be because this was a no due diligence deal.